Hello, everybody. This is Love. Hello, good afternoon. I recognize a lot of familiar faces from the past presentation. Thank you for sticking around, and for everyone that just got here, welcome to the Swanndale's 24th Annual Chautauqua. We're very excited to bring this presentation back in person after 2 years of doing it digitally, so thank you all for coming out to support us. I am very excited to introduce our next presenter. Our next presenter is Trina Brown-Hicks. Trina is a lifelong resident of Lewes, Delaware. She earned her bachelor's degree in business from Delaware State University. She serves as the commissioner with the City of Lewes' African American Heritage Commission and is a member of the Lewes Ad Hoc Police Committee. And she was also a past member of the Ethics Committee. And we are so very excited for her presentation on the Happy Day Club. So let's all give Trina a big round of applause.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much to the Division of Historic and Cultural Affairs, Swanndale Museum, Ms. Bridget Warner, and all of you for inviting me to listen to the humble beginnings of the Happy Day Club. So, in talking to a member of the audience, someone thought the Happy Day Club may have been a club, but it's actually a building. It was a hub of activity here in Lewes, not too far away, around the corner on DuPont Avenue. The Happy Day Club had 3 eras, I would say, of existence. One of them was when the Happy Day Club was called the Robinson's Coliseum. Now, unfortunately, I have not been able to find a whole heck of a lot of information other than a photo of the Robinson's Coliseum, which is the exact building where on DuPont Avenue. DuPont and Park Avenue is where the Happy Day Club was located. And I could not find, I know that Robinson's Coliseum was a DuPont-owned building, but I can't find why it was named Robinson's Coliseum. So hopefully sometime in the future, maybe we can narrow that down. But at a point in time, the Happy Day Club eventually ended up in my grandparents' hands. My grandfather was named Marshall Lockwood, and his wife Beatrice Williams, and they became the owners of the Happy Day Club. And my sister, who was supposed to be here with me and support me and give me her very own oral history, unfortunately was not able to attend. Her husband had an aneurysm that had to be repaired. So she is not here, but she was good enough to give me an oral history of her memories, which I'm going to give you today. I'm going to read. Everybody knows it's nice to have a story read to them, to hear and feel, and even a sense of smell as the story is read. So I'm going to read her memories of the Happy Day Club to you. Is that all right? Sure. All right. Now, remember, when I said it had its humble beginnings, when I start reading this, you'll see why in her voice. My sister is now in her 70s, and I'm the barber. Sugar Bee, my maternal grandmother, Beatrice Williams, harvested grapes and cherries annually to make some of the best wine you ever tasted. On a far side in the yard was a shed or a small barn. Behind the shed where the clotheslines hung. The clothes were washed and laundered every day. We had a large black and white border collie named Spot. Perhaps Spot was so large because I was so small. During those days, in the 1940s and early 1950s, under a segregated United States system, Negroes could not patronize white businesses or business establishments. I remember having to go to the kitchen entrance or an employee's door of a restaurant to purchase a sandwich or a meal to take out, or having to stand at the corner counter of the drugstore in order to receive an ice cream cone or a sundae to take out. I could not sit at the counter to eat. Now, back to the speakeasy. As I said, Negroes did not have a place to gather and socialize, so my house became that location. I did not think it was unusual to have a jukebox in the living room. Why? Didn't everyone? Saturday evenings, Slim, that was our nickname for our grandfather, Marshall Lockwood, would bring in cases of bottled beer, half pints of whiskey into the house. He would line up the inventory on the dresser in his bedroom and assess what was to be sold for that day. Grandmother, we called her Sugar Bee, was in the kitchen also preparing for the next day. Chickens were being cut up, seasoned and stored in the refrigerator, ready for frying into chicken sandwiches to be sold to those needing to feed that liquor. Every Sunday morning, the Iceman would come and bring large blocks of ice and put them in 2 or 3 galvanized tubs. Slim then took an ice pick and chopped the ice into smaller pieces, almost the size of ice cubes. Cubed ice. Our job, mine and my sister's, was to put the bottles of beer into the ice to chill. Then we took our baths and got ready for church. At church, my mom was an usher. Sugar Bee sang on the choir, and my sister and I attended Sunday school classes. Often, there was some additional activity after church service, YPD, meaning Young People's Department, or missionary meetings, or social gathering or tea, or visiting preachers and congregations from other churches. Church was the focal point of social life. After church, it was back home. People were starting to gather, and I thought it was great that we always had company on Sunday. Our house was the place to be. There was always a good time to be had by all. Just when the party was getting started, my mom would have some other event for my sister and I to attend. Movies, walks in the park or on the beach, visits to the museum, visits with my friends, or anything else to get us away from the home. We didn't get back until everyone was gone. We always missed the party. When I asked why we couldn't stay home, Mom said it was not an environment for young ladies. Running a speakeasy was illegal, but the officials always looked the other way. I'm sure several cops were on the take and often stopped by for a little taste. Officer Lynn Ritter frequently stopped by under the guise of keeping order. Marshall Lockwood, my grandfather, had a lot of influence in the community. He got voters to the polls during elections and used his connections with government officials to get things done in the neighborhood. When Lewes students needed transportation to go to Jason High School, Marshall Lockwood obtained the contract and purchased a school bus that got them to and from school. Times were changing, And when the law could no longer ignore an illegal operation of selling alcohol, the mayor of Lewes, Otis Smith, and Governor Caleb Boggs arranged for Marshall Lockwood to purchase the business in the building owned by Mr. Hill at the corner of 4th and DuPont Streets. The business was a package store where alcoholic beverages were sold, thus the birth of the Happy Day Club. Mr. Hill was offered the opportunity to transfer his operations to 2nd Street and became known as Hilly's Liquor Store. The Happy Day Club became the hub of nightlife in the Black community. As a nightclub, it attracted many talents, bands, exotic dancers, singers, etc., from all over the Eastern Shore. Clientele came from far and wide to be seen on the scene. The place was always packed. All the ladies and gents put on their glad rags, dressed up to go. If you missed the show, your friends spent days gloating about what you missed. As a child, I was not allowed to go to the club at night, but I earned my allowance by cleaning up the place each morning, washing off the tables, cleaning the ashtrays, sweeping the floor, and cleaning the bathrooms and washing the glasses. The club was also a meeting place for civic organizations in the community. The Men's Civic Club and the Women's Jolly Jills were two of the groups who met there often. Among other projects, these groups sponsored fundraising events to purchase sports equipment and playground equipment, swings, sliding boards, monkey bars, and seesaws for the field across the street from the Happy Day Club, which is now known as Ship Carpenter Square. This field, owned by Mayor Otis Smith, was leased by the Happy Day Club for a token amount of money, about $100 or maybe less, to provide a play area for the neighborhood kids. The club sponsored a baseball team and laid out a baseball diamond. This became the home field for the local baseball team. Home games were the highlight of the season. The whole town came out to support them. There were many good players on the team. The Jolly Jills sold refreshments, chicken sandwiches, potato salads, hot dogs, Kool-Aids, and cupcakes. Money raised paid expenses for the team. That's where my sister ended her story. I think she got tired. But I just loved that she would tell me these stories over and over again, and I finally had her put it down in writing because I did not want to forget. She said some of her details may be off a little bit, but it's her truth. So that's how she saw it. So I had some good friends of mine, Miss Donnell and Miss Pam, to help me find some other history and about the Happy Day Club. And I wanted to know, well, how did it get to my grandfather and how did it change hands and all of that? Well, some of the information that we were looking at seems to indicate that Mr. Clayton Melson, who was the funeral director at the time, he buried a lot of African Americans, and a lot of the African Americans are buried in the cemetery, Old St. George Cemetery. And apparently, from what they could find out in their research, is that Mr. Alfred Raleigh apparently died and owed a sum of money that my grandfather, Marshall Lockwood, sufficed and paid, and somehow the Happy Day Club property ended up in his hands. So that's what I know of that. But the other thing that I found out in getting some of this research done is that when my grandfather, Marshall Lockwood, was 19 years old, and when I say humble beginning, he actually, his address was the Newcastle work home. So I said, well, what is the Newcastle work home? He was 19. It was prison. And I'm thinking, well, why am I telling that? I said because I'm proud that he went from one status to another. He was in prison. I don't know why. I haven't found that out yet. I'm still researching that. But at 19 and back in 1919 or 1920, he was born in 1901. So times, I guess, I don't know what it could be at this point, but times were hard for African Americans, and anything could have landed him in prison. But in 1940, in the census, he appears as living in Philadelphia at the age of 40, working as a waiter. Well, my grandmother lived in Philadelphia, so we suspect that's how he met my grandmother. And then they came to back to Delaware. He was born here, but after whatever incident happened, he moved to Philly and then came back. Then he acquired the Happy Day Club. So that is a little bit about my grandfather. But after they passed away, after my grandmother and grandfather passed away, the Happy Day Club transitioned to my parents, Isaac Brown and Beatrice Brown. Her maiden name was Williams. And that was around in the 70s. Well, the 70s, that was the disco in the 80s disco era. So I was able to locate pictures. Unfortunately, I didn't bring them with me, but locate pictures of the Happy Day Club and the Happy Day Club baseball team. Actually, I do have the pictures, but it's in a PowerPoint form, and I'll leave it if anybody wants to look at it. But they remodeled the Happy Day Club. The Happy Day Club started to run down from lack of care and whatnot, but on the inside, they remodeled it. And I remember being babysat in the Happy Day Club. During the night, when everything was going on, there was another level, a second level. And up there, my grandfather had a bed up there and, a refrigerator, anything that you wanted. It was like an apartment. And so I heard that he had that over there when my grandmother would kick him out. So that was his place to go. But I was babysat there can you imagine being able to sleep when all the activities were going on and the music and the dancing and everything was playing? But then I also heard at one time that the Happy Day Club, also the second level, was where the white folks could go, because they, just like there was segregation at that time, they could be at the second level and not participate down at the bottom level where the black people were. Whereas that's the same kind of situation sometimes in the movies when we had the segregation here in Lewes. The black folks would be at top. They called that the peanut gallery, and the white patrons could be down the bottom in the movie theaters. So it was the opposite at the Happy Day Club. So, but the Happy Day Club was on the Chitlin circuit. And just like some of the history we heard about the Rosedale Beach, some of the entertainers that also visited the Happy Day Club were from me finding out, getting some oral history from a lot of people who used to visit there. They told me Little Freddie King visited there, the Continentals, the Upsetters, who were, they were actually Little Richard's backup band. I was told James Brown visited there before he was really known as James Brown, Fats Domino, and some of the DJs in the area visited there, Hoppy Adams and Chet Poison Ivy. So along with the Happy Day Club being part of the Chitlin circuit, so was the beach. We have a little technical difficulty here.
Sorry. Minor technical.
That's okay.
How good is your yelling?
I can yell. So, but what I did find out was that the Happy Day Club, when it transitioned to my grandfather, it was $275. So can you imagine, getting property back then for that little amount of money? So but I just wanted to share those humble beginnings of the Happy Day Club and the memories that I have. I was too young to actually participate in all the festivities. And by the time I went to college to study business because I wanted to run the Happy Day Club and make it better than what it was. And in the 80s, it burned down. I was so devastated. I was so devastated when it burned down. And the former mayor and I were talking. He said he remembers getting the word when it burned down. But I can tell you that I had to change and figure out what I was going to do in life after that. But we always have those memories, and every time I talk to people who are in their 70s and 80s, they tell me about the Happy Day Club and what a good time they had. They also tell me about what drew them to Lewes. And my father came to Lewes, and he ended up being the owner after my grandfather passed. My mother and father became the owners, but he came to Lewes because of the fishing industry. And anytime anybody who came to Lewes because of the fishing industry, the Menhaden, if you heard of the Menhaden fishery and what have you, they knew where to go. They knew to go to the Happy Day Club. They knew to go to the Black Beach, and they knew to go to Rosedale Beach in order to enjoy themselves. And I'm just happy to be part of that legacy. And that's all I have for you today. Does anybody have any questions? No questions? Yes, ma'am.
Yes. About what year did your grandfather purchase it?
It said 1936.
So during the Depression.
Mm-hmm.
Did it run all the way to 1980?
To 1980, yes, until it burned down in the 80s, early 80s.
Does it have fire insurance?
I guess it did because it did pay, but I don't think it was worth the while to rebuild. But I did also find out I still have copies of the liquor license and some of the paraphernalia of the Happy Day Club. And the Happy Day Club had a package store a walk-up package store. And I heard that that was the only license issued for that type of package store in Delaware. So, and there's never another one issued like that. So, I mean, you have drive-through, because I know Mr. Uptown that you could go to the drive-through package store, but never a walk up and get your from the window.
What did you do instead?
After I graduated college, I went to work for a investment group. So I learned how to write those prospectuses and price mutual funds every day. So but now I work for Humana with Dover Air Force Base with TRICARE, so the military medical insurance. Yes, ma'am.
Later on, did you hire any white performers, and did you have a large group of white folks that came as well?
Well, later on, there mixed crowds did come, but I can tell you, from what I'm hearing, they had fun when they came to the Happy Day Club, but it was probably 99% still African American patronized throughout its existence. Mm-hmm. And I don't know any performers. Mm-hmm.
The folklore is that Otis Smith worked with your grandfather, and he knew when the fish were running, and your grandfather would close the Happy Day Club depending upon what time they were going to go out in the morning. Do you have any evidence of that?
No, but I heard also that I heard a similar story that the Happy Day Club had to shut down at a certain time, and then 1 minute after they could reopen back up. Maybe an hour after, but they could open back up and start for the next day his event.
Well, and Hilly's is still in business as a liquor store at R&L.
Oh, really?
Oh. Yes. So the question was, can I say a little bit more about the bus that my grandfather organized to go to Jason? Well, what I can say is that my grandfather was also a type of businessman other than the Happy Day Club. So he did do a lot. And because Jason was the segregated school where kids needed to go and travel to Georgetown, they needed a way to do that. And apparently he purchased a bus in order to take the kids back and forth to Georgetown, which is now Del Tech. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, and I did hear that sometimes he had other people drive the bus on his behalf when he had to work. And a funny story was told. One of the that I heard that one time one of the drivers that he hired was so drunk that he couldn't drive. And so one of the students, who happened to be, I think it was Robert Miller, drove that bus back from Del Tech home. And as a student, he drove the bus. And it was funny because as he got older, he owned his fleet of buses as well. And Robert Miller used to be the funeral undertaker local here in the town of Lewes as well.
Given your father's relationship with the Happy Day Club and the existence of what we're now calling Johnny Walker Beach, was there any relationship between the two of them? Did your father go over there and support activities over there? Because I know that was used for social events.
I can tell you, when I was a child, I lived at the beach. And the now beach that has been renamed Johnny Walker's Beach, my father always took me there. So I can't really remember a lot about my grandfather taking me there, but my father took me there all the time, and my mother. And I even have a picture of him in front of the building that used to be Johnny Walker's. It was a pink building, and it was a large building. The food was outstanding. But Mr. Walker was more than that. He although he owned that, but he owned other businesses, and he was another pillar of the community. And he owned land and properties all over. And tomorrow, if you aren't aware, there is a recognition of Mr. Johnny Walker's that is going to be at Lewes, at Johnny Walker's Beach. It's renamed Johnny Walker's Beach. So if anybody would like to attend, you're welcome to do that. It is tomorrow. The tribute starts at 1 to about 5 o'clock. Mm-hmm. And absolutely. And, parking can be sometimes, arduous at the beach. The Lewes line, which is the bus line here at Lewes, will make a stop at Johnny Walker's Beach. And you can either park at the ferry terminal and catch it from there, because I know that's a big, parking lot. And I may catch it right there at George H.P. Smith Park and just travel on over myself. So we'll see. Where was the Rosedale Beach? We just had a presentation. It was Millsboro. Mm-hmm. That's it. Thank you.
And our best to your brother-in-law.
Thank you.
Well, we want to give Trina another round of applause for that wonderful presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
That was wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you. I enjoyed yours as well. Great information. Absolutely. Oh, absolutely.
They're so connected.
Okay, how can I get in touch with you through? I don't have a card, I'm sorry.
Here, I just got these done.
Yeah, that's so much.
Phone number and my email.
Okay.
So I really enjoyed it. I love the food. It's giving me chills right now.
Oh, wow. We're doing the Lewes African American Heritage Commission. We've been starting to gather some oral history. So, eventually we're going to be able to present.
And my dad was telling me we went to the beach down there. I have been there.
Right down the street.
Right there. That's what he told me. Please contact me. Please keep in touch. You are amazing. And tell your sister thank you.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah. It was something we knew he was